The world today worships speed. Startups sprint toward scale like gladiators thrown into the arena of attention, funding, and market share. Everyone's chasing the next disruption, the next unicorn, the next headline. But in the storm of noise, one figure would walk in silent power, calm, steady, unshaken. Not because he lacked ambition, but because his ambition was anchored in something deeper. Marcus Aurelius would not just survive this scene. He would dominate it, not with hype, but with clarity. Not with ego, but with resolve. Not with noise, but with a silence so strong it bends the room. Imagine him in the center of a sleek, glass-walled boardroom. The founder's chair. Steady, posture upright. Investors whisper numbers. Competitors obsess over trends. Social media swirls with chaos. And yet, Marcus does not flinch, because he doesn't chase approval. He commands respect by commanding himself. He would build not for vanity, but for virtue. Not to impress the world, but to improve it. While others pivot with every breeze of public opinion, Marcus would stay grounded. Not because he's inflexible, but because he knows that a ship that adjusts its sails without a compass only drifts faster into fog. This is what makes him lethal in the startup world. His power isn't in a pitch deck. It's in presence. His strength isn't in viral marketing. It's in the way he masters his mornings. The way he confronts fear like an old friend. The way he welcomes discomfort as the cost of clarity. Marcus doesn't need hustle porn. He wakes before the sun not to chase dopamine, but to prepare for war. The internal war of impulse, doubt, and distraction. While today's world screams, grind harder, he whispers, control your mind, and you control your fate. He sees through illusion, sees through vanity metrics, sees through the addiction to speed that makes founders burn out before they even know why they started. While others chase visibility, Marcus builds invincibility. A quiet force that compounds. Discipline over dopamine, thought over reaction, creation over performance. And that's the first lesson he brings to our world. Mastery begins not with building a product, but with building the self. How can you lead a team if you can't lead your thoughts? How can you manage capital if you can't manage your moods? How can you scale a mission if you shrink from discomfort? Marcus knew that power without self-command is just a louder version of weakness. So he practiced poverty when he had luxury. He rehearsed loss when he had abundance. He visualized the worst not out of pessimism, but to strip fear of its leverage. Because a founder who fears nothing is a founder who creates anything. He would walk into a startup accelerator not looking to impress, but to observe. Not to pitch, but to serve. While others try to appear confident, he actually is, because confidence built on principles doesn't tremble at rejection. His product, clarity, his strategy, stillness, his competitive edge. He doesn't need validation to act. Now picture the chaos of a series of funding round. Founders scrambling for meetings, begging for investor belief. Marcus, he doesn't beg, he prepares. He would approach that room the same way he approached the battlefield, aware of uncertainty but never owned by it. Because his sense of value doesn't come from the valuation. Comes from virtue. He would write code with the same devotion he wrote in his journal, with intention, without ego. He'd treat bugs like setbacks in life. Expected, embraced, and refined. Every crash, every pivot, every user complaint. Fuel for wisdom, not friction for his pride. Where others build apps for downloads, Marcus would build systems for impact. He doesn't think in likes or follows. He thinks in legacies, in the ripple of values, in the architecture of inner alignment. Because the greatest startup is the soul, and Marcus Aurelius was its most disciplined engineer. He would not waste a moment on the algorithm of social approval. He would spend his time debugging the human experience. Why do we fear failure? Why do we chase applause? Why do we suffer more in imagination than in reality? And then he would turn those answers into tools. Tools for resilience. Tools for clarity. Tools for execution. Because what is entrepreneurship if not stoicism in action? You face rejection, doubt, chaos, sleepless nights, critics, setbacks, uncertainty. But you endure. You press forward. You choose action over excuse. You choose value over vanity. You create. And that's exactly what Marcus did. Every morning, in the most powerful seat in Rome, with more pressure than any founder will ever face, and yet he chose presence over panic, reflection over reaction, duty over drama. He didn't need to post quotes. He lived them. His morning wasn't filled with dopamine hits from endless scrolling. It was filled with questions that cut to the bone. What am I avoiding? What do I fear? What can I control today? And those questions, they are more powerful than any KPI, because they align the only startup that matters, your character. Imagine bringing that mindset into your product, into your team, into every decision. Imagine leading not with charisma, but with consistency. Not with hype, but with harmony. Not with bravado, but with brutal self-honesty. That's how Marcus would crush this world. Not by playing its games, but by changing its rules. The second lesson Marcus Aurelius would bring to today's startup world is this: leadership is not domination, it's discipline in public. Not how loud your voice echoes in a meeting, but how quietly you carry your integrity when no one is watching. You want to lead a team? Then lead yourself through the storm first. Show them what it looks like to bleed for a cause bigger than comfort. Show them what it looks like to say no to the easy applause and yes to the hard truth. Marcus didn't need a motivational poster on the wall. His life was the poster. He didn't need a hype squad. His mission was louder than any cheer. And in a world obsessed with personal branding, Marcus knew. The strongest brand is the one you build in the dark, brick by brick, with no audience but your conscience. Startup culture today talks about grit, hustle, never giving up, but Marcus practiced something rarer: emotional endurance. The power to keep showing up when the world misunderstands you. The strength to hold the line when others fold to convenience. He knew that startups don't die from failure. They die from forgetting why they started. So when the users don't grow, when the product breaks, when the feedback stings, when your team questions your choices, that's your crucible. That's your invitation to become someone sharper. Not someone more reactive, but someone more resilient. Because Marcus would tell you, don't aim to avoid problems. Aim to become the person for whom those problems are small. That's growth. That's evolution. That's how leaders are forged, not in peace, but in pressure. He would treat feedback not as threat, but as a mirror. He wouldn't waste time defending his ego. He would dissect it, strip it, reforge it, because only the man who has tamed his ego can truly scale his vision. And that vision, it wouldn't be about vanity metrics. It wouldn't be about exit strategies. It would be about legacy. Because while today's founder might ask, what will make me rich? Marcus would ask, what will outlive me? He would design with time in mind, build with death on his shoulder. Every decision weighed not by ROI, but by the quiet question, does this align with virtue? That clarity would terrify his rivals, because it's not loud, it's not boastful, it's calm, and calm in a frantic world is a weapon. He'd sit across from competitors foaming at the mouth to outscale him. He would nod, listen, then return to his desk and work in silence. Not because he's afraid, but because he knows true power doesn't advertise. It executes. He would not be interested in being first to market. He'd be obsessed with being right for the market and even more, being right with himself. He'd challenge you, the founder, to ask, are you building something that adds noise or something that creates meaning? Are you optimizing for speed or for soul? Are you chasing comfort or becoming the kind of person who doesn't need it? That's the third lesson. Marcus would build something so rare in today's world, it would feel radical, a company rooted in virtue. Imagine that. A startup not just for profit, but for principle. A business where every hire is not just about talent, but about temperament. Where culture is not a slide deck, but a lived code. Where the mission is not a marketing line, it's a compass you bleed for. Marcus would reject the founder archetype of the unstable genius. He would build a team of grounded warriors. thinkers, builders, people who didn't need drama to feel alive, because they already lived in pursuit of something eternal. And when things went wrong, because they always do, he wouldn't look for scapegoats. He'd look inward. He'd own it, fully, publicly, because he understood what most leaders forget. Blame is the enemy of growth. He wouldn't shame mistakes. He would study them. Every failure, every stumble, every silent heartbreak in the journey of building something real. He'd turn it into a lesson for the next version of himself. And that version, stronger, quieter, deadlier. He would meditate not in temples but in spreadsheets, in code reviews, in the lonely hours after midnight when it's just you, the screen, and your questions. And he would always ask, what is in my control right now? That's the fourth lesson, the core of Stoicism. The reason Marcus would thrive in a world designed to distract. Focus only on what you control. Not the market, not the algorithm, not the investor's moods, not the user's whims. Just you, your response, your clarity, your choices, your next right move. Imagine building a startup with that level of focus, where your peace is not tied to metrics, where your fire isn't dimmed by a bad quarter, where you show up day after day because you've already decided, I am the kind of person who builds, regardless. That's unshakable. That's unhackable. That's what makes empires. Not the kind of empires that crash under scandal, but the kind that stand long after your name is forgotten, because your principles remain etched in what you created. So Marcus would sit at his desk before the sun rose. No applause, no notifications, just silence, pen, a mind sharpening itself against the grindstone of truth. He'd begin not with code or calls, but with confrontation of self. He'd ask the questions most fear. Where am I deceiving myself? What am I clinging to that weakens me? What desire clouds my clarity? Because he knew the most dangerous threat to any founder isn't competition. It's illusion. The illusion that you have more time. The illusion that validation equals value. The illusion that comfort means you're winning. But Marcus Aurelius didn't seek comfort. He trained for collapse. He greeted adversity like a familiar guest, not with dread, but with readiness. And that mindset, more than any funding round, any growth hack, any viral campaign, that's the competitive advantage. This world crowns the loud. But Marcus understood what is loud is often hollow. What is calm is often unstoppable. He would raise a team not by demanding loyalty, but by embodying it. Not through slogans, but through sacrifice. He'd walk into every meeting with presence, not performance. And people would follow him, not because they were told to, but because they felt anchored in his gravity. That is leadership. Not charisma, not charm, but conviction. The steady hand in chaos. The voice that doesn't rise in fear, but lowers the room into focus. Marcus Aurelius would not ask his team to do anything he wouldn't endure tenfold. He would not demand work-life balance while living out of balance himself. He would lead like a soldier in the front line, eyes forward, back exposed to danger, because someone must protect the mission with their very presence. And when the company faced betrayal, a co-founder walking out, a scandal, a public failure, Marcus wouldn't panic. He wouldn't retaliate. He would breathe, pause, and respond, not with vengeance, but with vision. Because a Stoic doesn't waste time on what they cannot change. They alchemize it into strength. Every wound would become wisdom. Every failure would become fuel. He wouldn't fire people out of pride. He'd coach them until the choice was clear. He wouldn't scale recklessly. He'd grow with harmony. He'd rather build a company slowly with soul than quickly with chaos. And when asked why he moves differently, he'd simply say, because I am not here to win by the world's definition. I am here to live by mine. That's the fifth lesson. Define your success or the world will do it for you. The modern founder is often trapped in comparison, chained to timelines not their own, measuring their worth by LinkedIn posts, Forbes lists, and the highlight reels of others. But Marcus knew, envy is a sickness of the soul. It is blindness dressed as ambition, and the cure is inner architecture. So he would design a life as intentionally as a product. He'd schedule time not just for output, but for introspection. He'd protect his mornings like treasure, guard his attention like a gate, say no often, sharply, without apology, because every yes has a cost. Every meeting, every partnership, every initiative that isn't aligned, it isn't neutral. It is erosion. Erosion of clarity. Erosion of soul. And if you lose that, you lose everything. No valuation can buy it back. No exit can restore what you traded away. So Marcus would challenge you. Why are you building what you're building? And who are you becoming in the process? Because what you build will eventually reflect who you are. If you build with ego, you'll drown in it. If you build with fear, you'll collapse under pressure. But if you build with virtue, discipline, patience, truth, then your product will not just serve. It will last. That's what he understood better than any founder today. Longevity is not a feature of business. It is a consequence of character. He would not chase trends. He would not fear being misunderstood. He would not explain his vision to everyone. He would let time prove him right, because he wasn't trying to be a legend. He was trying to be aligned. And that's more rare. That's more dangerous. That's more magnetic. Marcus would walk through the chaos of startup culture, the drama, the clout chasing, the delusion, and remain untouched. Not because he lacked ambition, but because his ambition had roots. Deep ones. The kind that don't snap in storms. The kind that turn obstacles into scaffolding. He would outlast you not by running faster, but by running truer. While others burn out chasing the horizon, Marcus would walk in silence toward the summit. And when he got there, he wouldn't shout. He'd look out, journal in hand, and whisper. All of this was practice. Practice. That's the word Marcus Aurelius lived by. Every trial, every delay, every disappointment. Not a curse, but a chance. A test of alignment. A sharpening of will. A refining of character. He didn't ask for ease. He asked for strength. He didn't pray for success. He prepared for resistance. He didn't cry for relief. He trained for endurance. Because in the Stoic heart, there is no tragedy, only training. There is no failure, only feedback. That's why, in today's startup scene, he would terrify the industry. Because Marcus doesn't need hype. He has habits. He doesn't wait for motivation. He has mechanisms. He doesn't seek applause. He has awareness. And awareness, true, raw, unflinching awareness, is lethal in a world asleep in distraction. He'd spot the ego in a co-founder's pitch not by tone, but by tension. He'd hear the fear in a partner's silence. He'd know when to speak and, more importantly, when not to. He wouldn't fill the air with sound just to feel seen. He'd let silence do the cutting. That's how he builds. Deliberately, not desperately. And when the pressure mounts, the product crashes, the market shifts, the press attacks, he doesn't flinch. Because he expected it. He rehearsed it. He trained for it in the cold mornings, when no one was watching, and the only reward was knowing, I showed up. That's the sixth lesson. Your preparation must be stronger than your panic. Panic comes from forgetting what you control. Preparation comes from remembering it, and acting on it daily without fail. Marcus would stack his day not with urgency, but with order. Each hour chosen. Each action examined. He wouldn't wear busyness like a badge. He'd treat it like a virus. Because busyness is not productivity. It's noise wearing a mask of importance. He'd ask, is this task necessary? Does it align with my principles? Or is it just motion to numb uncertainty? He'd move slower than the rest, but with more precision, more gravity, more purpose. And in time, that stillness would compound into momentum, into mastery, into something the world can't copy. Because the Stoic founder doesn't scale through force. He scales through focus. Marcus would train his team in the same philosophy. Not just with words, but with presence, with consistency, with action. He'd be the first in, the last out, the calmest in conflict, and the most honest in review. He would say, we do not fear feedback here. We do not escape mistakes. We confront them. We own them. We learn relentlessly, because the mission is too important for ego to win. That's culture. Not perks, not snacks, not slogans. Culture is character in motion. Culture is the values you're willing to sacrifice for, especially when it's hard. And Marcus would sacrifice comfort, speed, even approval, if it meant building something real. So imagine the investor meeting where they tell him, "Your growth isn't fast enough." He smiles. "Then I'm growing at the right pace." Or when the marketing team says, "We need to cut corners to compete," he says, "Then we compete with integrity or not at all." That's not weakness. That's clarity. That's the kind of clarity that doesn't bend to market moods, because it's anchored in timeless truths. Marcus doesn't just want to win today. He wants to win in 1,000 tomorrows. He sees through the illusion of the moment, through trends, fads, hype cycles. He knows they will pass. What remains? Character, values, vision, discipline. And those are unkillable. So when founders around him burn out, flame out, sell out, Marcus remains. Not because he's lucky, but because he's rooted. And roots, they don't rush. They don't shout. They don't sparkle. They anchor. And in storms, they survive. That's the 7th lesson. Be the root, not the leaf. The leaf dances in the wind, tossed by every gust of opinion, trend, and temptation. But the root, it holds, it nourishes, it builds unseen. And one day, when the tree bears fruit, the root doesn't boast. It simply continues, steady, silent, essential. Marcus Aurelius would not be the loudest founder. He'd be the last one standing. And when the media finally turns their gaze asking how he did it, how he scaled without selling out, how he led without losing himself, he would say nothing. He'd open his journal, turn to a page written years before, one that reads, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That line, "Be one," would become the quiet motto of everything Marcus built. Not a tagline for the website, not a tweet for attention, but a pulse running through the core of his company. Because he didn't believe in selling virtue. He believed in living it, quietly, relentlessly, without fanfare. And that alone would become the loudest thing about him. His startup wouldn't chase attention. It would earn trust. It wouldn't flood inboxes with clickbait. It would solve real problems with quiet precision. It wouldn't inflate metrics to secure another round. It would build slowly, surely, in alignment with something deeper than profit. It would become a fortress, not built of walls but of integrity. And when a recession hits, when the funding dries up, when half the industry collapses from overexposure and underpreparation, Marcus and his company would still be standing. Why? Because they never depended on hype. Because they never confused velocity with direction. Because they built from the inside out. That's the 8th lesson. External chaos means nothing when internal order is strong. The Stoics understood what every founder forgets in moments of panic. That peace isn't found when the world calms down. It's found when you no longer require the world to be calm. It's a discipline, a training, a muscle built in silence when no one's watching. Marcus trained it every day. Not with mantras, with moments, real ones. When betrayal knocked, he didn't collapse. He journaled, reflected, responded with grace and fire. When doubt whispered, he didn't distract himself. He interrogated it, sat with it, cut it down to size. When success tempted his ego to swell, he reminded himself of death, of fragility, of how little applause means when your soul is hollow. He didn't need stoicism as a shield. He used it as a scalpel, to cut deeper into his own illusions, his own pride, his own complacency, and he would teach his team the same. That greatness isn't built by knowing everything, but by knowing yourself. He'd tell the product lead, "Don't ship features that feed addiction. Build tools that foster freedom." He'd tell the marketer, "Don't sell fear. Sell truth." He'd tell the engineer, "Perfection is not the goal. Progress without ego is." Because Marcus didn't want a perfect company. He wanted a principled one. And that's rarer, harder, worth everything. He would fire fast, not those who made mistakes but those who broke integrity. And he'd do it quietly, firmly, without venom, because he understood the culture becomes what you tolerate. And Marcus tolerated very little that weakened the mission. He didn't care if you were brilliant. If you lacked discipline, you were a liability. He didn't care if you had connections. If you lacked humility, you were a ticking bomb. He didn't care if your resume was dazzling. If your values were hollow, you had no place on his team. That's how he built loyalty, not through perks, but through principle. And his team, they would run through fire for him, not out of fear, not for rewards, but because they knew this man lives what he says. He doesn't flinch when things go wrong. He doesn't brag when they go right. He is steady, sharp, centered. And when you work under a leader like that, you rise. You hold yourself to a higher standard. You grow into someone the younger version of you would be proud of. Because Marcus didn't just build a company. He built people. And that is the 9th lesson. Don't just build for the world. Build the world within others. He would know your name, know your fears, see past your performance into your potential. And when you made a mistake, the kind that costs time, money, reputation, he wouldn't explode. He'd look you in the eye and say, own it, learn from it, rise from it. Because mistakes weren't the enemy. Stagnation was. His entire philosophy was a war against stagnation. Against being reactive, against being petty, against being distracted. That's why he woke up every day like it was battle. Because it was. Not against others, but against the weakness inside. The voice that says, take the easy path. The pull toward comfort, comparison, and compromise. He didn't hate that voice. He trained against it. And that's what made him invincible. Not untouchable. Not emotionless. But clear. So when you walked into his office on your worst day, he'd hand you a glass of water, meet your overwhelmed eyes, and say something simple. Something that cuts through the fog like a blade. Remember what you can control. And begin again. Begin again. Those 2 words would be the mantra whispered through the halls of his startup. Not as an excuse. Not as a reset button. But as a rally cry. A call back to self-command. A Stoic anthem in a digital age drunk on immediacy. Because Marcus Aurelius knew the most powerful thing a founder can do is start again. Without shame, without story, without delay. That product you launched and no one used? Begin again. That investor who ghosted you after promising the world? Begin again. That week you lost to anxiety, distraction, spirals of comparison? Begin again. The Stoic doesn't cling to failure, nor do they cling to praise. Both are dust in the wind. Both are forgotten by tomorrow. What matters is this moment and how you choose to meet it. That is the battlefield. Right here. Not tomorrow. Not in your strategy doc. Not in your next round of funding. But in the breath you take now. The words you speak now. The next action you decide to make now. Marcus lived here. In the razor-thin edge of the present. He would tell you, in a world hypnotized by the future, you must become a master of the present. Because presence, in a distracted world, is your ultimate advantage. While others obsess over what might happen, Marcus focuses on what is happening. While others chase what's next, he masters what's now. He doesn't waste time fighting reality. He accepts it, fully, fiercely, without resistance. And then moves. That's the 10th lesson. Acceptance is not surrender. It is the starting point of power. When the product breaks, he doesn't panic. He listens. When the competitor wins the deal, he doesn't spiral. He studies. When the team morale dips, he doesn't hide. He steps in, holds space, leads harder. He doesn't blame. He doesn't escape. He faces everything. Eyes open, heart steady, mind clear. Because the man who can look reality in the eye without flinching, he becomes unstoppable. And in those rare moments when doubt creeps in, when the vision gets heavy, when the journey feels endless, Marcus doesn't reach for external comfort. He reaches for silence, stillness, his journal, his breath. He writes not to be clever. He writes to remember who he is. He writes lines like, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He doesn't write for followers. He writes for focus. Because a founder who reflects is a founder who refines. And refinement is rarer than brilliance. Anyone can dream up an idea, but to chisel it down, shape it, mold it into something real, that takes discipline. That takes emotional maturity. That takes a war against your own delusions. And Marcus would fight that war every day. He would sit with his flaws and polish them like armor. He would stare into his fears until they blinked first. He would make truth his most loyal business partner, even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. Because pain to Marcus was not an enemy. It was a compass. It told him where he still clung to ego, where he still feared loss, where he still needed to grow. And so he welcomed pain, transformed it, alchemized it into presence, precision, power. That's how he'd build a startup that doesn't just survive, but echoes. Long after the product evolves, long after the name fades, long after the headlines shift, the impact would remain. The principles would ripple. The character would endure. Because Marcus Aurelius didn't just build for now. He built for forever. And that is the final lesson. Build for eternity. Not for IPOs. Not for exits. Not for headlines. But for that sacred moment, years from now, when someone picks up what you created and whispers, "This helped me." That is legacy. That is Stoicism applied. That is how Marcus Aurelius would crush today's startup scene. Not by playing louder, faster, flashier, but by being more still, more intentional, more human. Because in the end, the Stoic founder doesn't seek domination. They seek alignment. And when you're aligned, deeply, fiercely, irrevocably aligned, the world doesn't stand a chance. And so, we come to the summit not of the story but of the soul. The final truth standing tall above the noise, staring down at the battlefield of modern ambition. Marcus Aurelius would stand here, not as a conqueror with trophies, but as a creator who never betrayed himself. No shortcuts, no compromises, no hollow victories, only alignment. He would look down at the startup world, the chaos, the churn, the false gods of scale and speed, and he would not laugh, nor judge, nor gloat. He would whisper what he always whispered. It was never about winning. It was about becoming. Becoming someone who leads with humility in a world that worships ego. Becoming someone who stays grounded in a culture built to distract. Becoming someone who chooses virtue, not because it's easy, but because it's right. You see, the reason Marcus Aurelius would crush today's startup scene is not because he was smarter or faster or more networked. It's because he was anchored. Anchored in truth. Anchored in values. Anchored in a code that no failure could shake, no victory could distort. And that's what makes him dangerous. That's what makes him rare. And that's what you must become. Not just a founder. Not just a builder. But a stoic leader in a world of noise. Because the world does not need another app. It needs a generation of builders who know who they are. Builders who wake up and fight their inner war before stepping into the outer one. Builders who lead not with desperation, but with discipline. Builders who don't just scale companies but scale character. This is your invitation. To rise before the sun. To journal like a warrior. To reflect like a philosopher. To act like an emperor in exile. With humility, with vision, with fire in your chest and silence in your soul. This is your time. Not to chase what glitters, but to embody what lasts. Not to impress the world, but to serve it, fiercely, wisely, unshakably. You are not here to build fast. You are here to build forever. So when you find yourself overwhelmed, pause. When you're tempted to quit, breathe. When you forget why you started, return. Return to that fire that doesn't flicker in applause. The one that burns silently through the darkest seasons. And remember, the greatest product you will ever build is the person you become. You don't need the world to understand you. You need to understand yourself. Then move. With grace. With strength. With stillness. Because Marcus Aurelius isn't just a statue in a museum. He's a blueprint. A reminder. A mirror. And that mirror now belongs to you. Look into it. And begin.